All right, hello.
Okay, great to have you on here, Andrew and Alberto. Today, we're going to have a look at Notion. Now, I use Notion regularly, but I use it for project management, and I think it's quite typical. I've gone through every single version of some sort of not CRM system, but some sort of project management system over the years, or note-taking system. I've used Evernote, I've used OneNote, every other kind of notepad going, electronic or analog. And I've always found it very frustrating that it feels square peg, round hole. It never quite fits with what I want it to do. Whereas Notion, when I stumbled across it last year, when I was looking at something called the concept of the second brain, and if you haven't looked at that, I would advise looking into that. The second brain, meaning that our brain is generally for creativity and not just for storing things. And when you're working, as we all are, working on multiple projects, you can become swamped and you can become quite easily overwhelmed by that. So I found that Notion was really great, and I was able to set it up for myself. It took me about 3 days to set it up, and I watched lots of YouTube tutorials on how to do that. But I'm using it for project management. Whereas today, Andrew's going to talk us through how to use it as a CRM, customer relationship or client relationship management system, specifically for voiceover artists. And we've also got Alberto here as well. And Alberto, you're a voiceover artist. I've known you for a long time now. Do you use any kind of CRM?
At the moment, I'm only using Excel pages and notebooks. I've been working for agents so far. I've been only working for agencies, and it's been kind of easy the way to get hold of all the information and manage it. But I'm at this very moment at the stage of starting to call on the doors myself, and it looks like it's going to get very messy. So far, the traditional way. I'm looking forward to see how I can apply this.
Sure. And Andrew Vevers, thanks for doing this. Do you want to take it away?
Sure, I'll share my screen. Okay. And hopefully you can see that now.
Yeah, we can.
So the presentation really, it's rather the challenge to try and make customer relationship management applications interesting, but I'll give it a crack. The presentation itself, Notion.so or Notion So What, that's their actual web address where we can go and find it. So this is really just to talk about what Notion is and how we can build a personal CRM based on working as a voiceover artist, which is what I assume many attendees today already do. So there's two main parts to this. The first, we shall talk about Notion itself. So, well, the quickest slide of all of them is just a tiny bit about me. I think it's important just to mention where Notion is so that you can just get going quickly as opposed to just rambling on about what it is. So I'll talk about where it is, what it is, why it matters, and I think any kind of CRM should matter for anyone who's running their own business, certainly as sort of typically freelancers as we are. Then I'll talk about sort of use cases that anybody could use Notion for in this kind of context, but then I'll go a little bit more specific so that we talk about how a freelancer might use it, and then also how specifically a voiceover artist might use it. At that point, I'll jump onto Notion just to show what it looks like from scratch. Then I'll talk briefly about pages and blocks, and then I'll introduce you to what I think is Notion's first killer feature, which makes it stand out. I'll do a quick recap. Then I'll launch into the second part, which talks all about CRMs. At that point, I will mention the second killer feature as I see it. And then we'll go on to just talk about the core considerations for what I think would make up a voiceover-based CRM. Your opinion may well differ from that, but it's just to go over the basics, just to get you thinking. At that point, the main part of the part 2 will be to actually get going and set some of this stuff up and wire it up together. And then after that, I'll bring up the dreaded costs slide, although you will be surprised at what's involved here. Other useful things that I think are good to know, the pros and the cons of Notion, and there are some cons, but I don't think any of them are deal breakers. And if you're rather thirsty for more in terms of learning more about this, I'll just touch on some of the things that you can use to find extra content. I'll recap and then I'll throw it back to Mike. Guy, sorry. I think there was an attendee called Mike. So we'll move on. A little part, just a bit about me. So I am based in Leeds in Yorkshire in the UK. I've been doing voiceover artist work for around 10 years, mainly in corporate, commercial and e-learning fields. During day-to-day, I have 2 main roles, as well as the voiceover work. I work in IT as a technical lead, so I lead teams of software developers in terms of producing and managing software. So I like to think I have a good idea about how best to use software. Main interests, no sniggering at the back about the pinball bit, but I do like music, tech, all things audio software. I find it all fascinating. Pinball and, of course, voiceover. I can be contacted via Linktree or via email, but that's really it about me. So straight on to the first part really about all of this, which is note-taking software. If we have a look at note-taking software, or those that try and pretend to be your second brain, it's rather a crowded market. And these are just a few examples of applications which I've used over the years, some of which may be familiar, some of which may not. And in fact, there's a red herring there. See if you can spot that. That's absolutely nothing to do with note-taking, but is in fact something to do with voiceover work. So there are a lot of applications there. Personally, I still use Evernote a lot, the green elephant in the middle. But what I've found is, having used these to try and organize thoughts and manage processes and improve things both in business and in home life, I've found that in the last few years, Notion has essentially replaced quite a few of those. And really, that's what I want to try and get across in this talk this morning, just to get you to think about the things it can do and whether or not it could possibly replace the applications that you're using. So first things first, where is it? Well, I said earlier that it's just a website. It's at notion.so. It's a Somalian domain. I don't really know why they chose that, but that's the address. There are Windows and Mac clients, and there are Android and iOS apps as well. If you have a BlackBerry, you're out of luck. They may have supported it once, but they don't now. So those are the 4 main platforms. I'm going to be using it in a web browser this morning, but rest assured, pretty much everything that you see on here, you can do in these apps as well. But I think the website is very good for finding a way around. So that's where it is. What is it? Notion themselves describe it as a project management and note-taking software, which is quite vague, but I guess it's pretty accurate. You can make it do those things. Their own website itself shows that it's quite geared towards teamwork and collaboration and things like that, document management and tables and things. But I think it's just as valid an application if you're using it yourself, as many of us may well be. So I personally would say that in less concise terminology, you could store information about anything. You could add pages or images or files, to-do lists and tables. It can do all of that very easily. You can also add reminders, and those will sync down to your mobile device and trigger, send alarms and alerts. And also, really, when you wire all of that up together, those kind of core bits of functionality, you can then really create your own customer relationship management application, which I think makes it very powerful, given that primarily it's a free application. So if that doesn't make you interested, there's other things to bear in mind. I would say, first of all, it's accessible, so you can get going very quickly. Hopefully you'll see that in a few minutes. There's a bit of a learning curve. but I think if you stick with it, the penny will drop and you'll start using it. I would say it's pretty versatile in that it has replaced other applications. For me, it might not be as good or as powerful as some of those, but I tend to think of it as a bit of a jack of all trades and a master of some. It's not perfect, but I don't think any application is. And as I've said before, the content you add anywhere is synced anywhere. So if you're away from your desk or your booth or your office, you can actually still continue to input information, manage information, because it's synced across to your mobile devices. And based on that syncing, it's a very powerful suite, given that it's free, but it's kind of free. Okay, there are some limits, and I'll come on to those later on. So when you wire all that up, it could be, I think, your own version, and that's the key thing of what a CRM should be. My version would be different from yours, but I think that's one of those key considerations. Because of its customizability, it can be anything you want it to be. And I think above all else, one very important point is it's a pleasure to use. It's easy to get going, it's intuitive, and it's attractive. It's quite a fun thing to operate and manage your way around. So I think that's an important point. Now, in terms of anybody who might use Notion, so use cases for anyone, as I've said, it's the kind of note taking for your average user. So you could store notes or ideas or a journal. You could share those notes with friends or family, or even a team or a full-blown enterprise. And in fact, Notion promote this, as we saw earlier, as in team-based collaboration, and they have enterprise plans. So they're fully used to engaging with enterprise-wide levels of subscriptions. But nevertheless, you can have things that are shared just between yourself and a few friends. You can do things like tracking things, so a to-do or a calendar or tables or databases. So this is the kind of thing that anybody might want to do. You can embed content. So you could embed videos, images, audio, and if you wanted to, then you could base that on creating attractive page layouts, which in turn could lead you to create a website. That could be private or public. Notion allow you to publish your content on their servers, but the website similarly could just be a private wiki, or it could be a public blog. So there's quite a few things you can do there. Now, if we go a bit more niche and consider a freelancer, then you're into the world of CRMs. Essentially, you could use Notion for this. So you could manage your contacts or your engagements with those contacts, and the projects that result from successful engagements and successful opportunities. You can also set reminders. So as I've said, it can alert you on no matter what platform you're on. So that can be very useful. So for example, you could use it to try and chase repeat work or renewal of work as a freelancer, or even chase payment. And who here hasn't had to do that once or twice? So if we go even further, we've got use cases for specifically a voiceover artist. So you may wish to manage your scripts, which could be annotated, albeit not in Notion. You can't annotate PDFs in Notion, but you can certainly store annotated PDFs in Notion. So you could manage your scripts, you could store your final voice recordings for your clients inside Notion. It fully supports file embedding. And you could do things like tracking and monitoring all aspects of your work. So things like the hit rates that you've been having per month or per year, and managing your client relationships, the project duration, and all those kind of things, even the number of amends per project. And I think really just the idea for that is, if you can report on it, you can then reflect on it, and really Notion can provide quite a resource for CPD or continuing professional development, but it's all about what you choose to store in there. Okay. So there's the CPD, it's report and reflect. And at this point, I think we'll just jump into Notion and just show you what on earth it looks like. So if we start Notion, if any of you here were just to go to notion.so and sign up, you would see something like this first of all. And this is this for yourself or for a team? And it defaults to yourself. If we just create a new what's called workspace in Notion. It just takes a few seconds and we will then see a workspace that's created that's completely secure to your account. No one else can see this content. And Notion creates or inserts a number of different what are called templates. Sort of starts for 10 really, so you can get going. Now here you can see we've got a getting started. That's always there in a new workspace, but some of these other things like quick notes or personal homepage or task list, they're all there, but we don't need to necessarily see those for this, because I think it can help to start completely from scratch, just to demonstrate what Notion is. So I'm just going to select clear templates, but if you were to create a new workspace, you'd get all these back. So I'll clear those. It leaves the getting started. So here's a sample page that shows you various bits and pieces of the text editing and embedding all sorts of help tutorials. So there's that there to start with. But if we just add a new page using that link there, we'll give it something very useful as a title. I'll just call it my first page. What we can do is we can add an icon. It'll pick a random icon and we can add a random cover, but you can change these. But over time, you sometimes might just want to stick with these and you become familiar with what you've actually typed and created. What we can do now is we can just type some content. So this is first line. So what? That's some text. Second line. And some of this can be bold, italics. We can change the color if we want. It's that kind of thing. We can make it a heading. If you're familiar with anything called Markdown, it supports all of that. So you can write very simple but structured content using heading 1 or heading 2, which is similar to HTML. But we have here a toggleable list where we can hide and expand and collapse different bits of content. But also notice that we can actually drag and drop content so it moves around. Okay, so you can reorder content quite easily. The other thing to bear in mind that as you write content, every single bit of content is called a block. So if I was to write 3 lines here, those A, B, C, D, those are 4 blocks. It's not one paragraph, but they're actually building blocks, all of which in this case are text. Okay, so you're getting the idea that you can add text in here. You can do things like table of contents, you can add images and files, but this is a page that you're actually just building up to represent what it is you want to store. So all of these things are blocks, as they're called, building blocks. We can add a new page inside this page by clicking the plus. We can see all of these other building blocks here, and it does go on. There are a lot of blocks you can add, and we'll cover some of those later on. But if we add a page here, we can see a page within a page, a bit Inception-like for the movie fans. So we'll just call this subpage. But notice also you have easy navigation at any point. We've got the breadcrumb up at the top. We've got my first page that expands to a subpage, and in there are no pages inside. But you can go as deep as you want. So in theory, you could almost see this as a nested folders. So you could have a top level page. My first page could represent something to do with your business. Another could be to do with specific voiceover recordings. And another one could be, I don't know, your favorite recipe collection. It could be any of those kind of things that you can store and rearrange at will. So if we just use the breadcrumb, we go back up and we can see there is a link to the subpage. We might want to just move it up there. We might just want to move the entire block down here and so on. So it's all drag and droppable within Notion. But the key thing to take away here is that every part of it is a block. So if we just go back to the slides for a second, here's an example from Notion themselves that explain the point about blocks. This is one page that you could create, and it contains all sorts of content. So we have text, some of which is formatted in terms of color. We have a heading, just as I showed you there. We have a toggleable list or toggle list. There's a checkbox, there's a map. All of these things are your basic blocks that you can add in. We have an image, we've got video, and we've got 2 tables here, all of which itself contain pages which can contain information about the thing in the table. So the blocks are key to Notion. And in fact, pages and blocks is what everything is about. So if we just consider just the points to think about pages and blocks, There's no concept of folders in Notion. There's no real concept of save. Once you type content, it's saved within a second or two. You have infinite undo, so you can always go back. And there are things like version history of pages, but we'll come on to that later. You have workspaces. We've just created one. We have pages. We've just created two, actually nested. And we've created blocks, maybe 10 or so, just mainly text. But we've seen there that you can nest pages. We've seen that you can rearrange blocks, and we can also convert one block into another. So if you've got some text and you want to make it into a heading, you can do that and vice versa. And all of that is great. You can click around, you can click on the plus and create things, but it takes me back really to the first main killer feature that allows you to work in Notion very quickly, and it's simply the slash key. Okay, so the first killer feature I would say in Notion is the slash key, and you can see it there. Type slash for commands. By just typing slash, you're able to just bring up the list of all the blocks. The most common ones are up at the top, but you can just navigate them with the keyboard and just start creating content. So new content, I can type, and then we hit enter, we can type slash, and then we can start doing things immediately. So this is a heading. We could create a heading 2, and this is a subheading. So this is the slash key in action. We can do all sorts of things like a to-do list, all that kind of stuff, just from within the keyboard. So you can get adding content very quickly. And I think that's a really important point to take. So I've shown you very quickly there just what Notion is. It's the idea that you've just got pages and blocks, content in there. You can store all of this content and sync it to all your devices. When you next open, if I was to open that up on my Android device, I would see that that magical content appear. You can search for it all as well. So if you end up recording all sorts of information about an engagement or a telephone conversation and you can't quite remember what it was, you will be able to search through your Notion workspace to be able to find that. And hopefully you can see that with very little effort, it's pretty fast. You can get going quickly with that. At that point, I don't know if there's any questions yet, but if there aren't, I think we'll just get straight on with the next part, which is really just to talk about CRMs. I guess any questions can wait till the end. Okay. So on to the second part, and CRMs this time. So it's CRMs that fit with the voiceover side in Notion, rather niche, as we've said. So the definition, well, hopefully we know what it stands for. It's a customer relationship management or client relationship management application. But here's a rather dull explanation, which is a CRM system helps organizations build customer relationships and streamline processes so that they can increase sales, improve customer service, and increase profitability. So there you go. Your definition may be different, but it's that idea where you can use a system to improve, refine, and essentially prune your own voiceover business in this case. Now, in terms of CRMs, we know there are many paid options. It's another crowded market, just like note-taking applications. Personally, I've looked into these. I very nearly went with Capsule, but I found in the end that there were so many CRMs that just did too much. They were just too complex. I found them just to be absolute overkill. And it was almost like when I opened them up, I wanted to hide most of it and just maintain some of the really basic stuff. And so I tended to think that, yeah, you're onto a loser here. I mean, for larger organizations, I think they're great. For freelancers, you know, and I know voiceover artists who use and are happy with spreadsheets. I'm less so, which is that's why I was looking into these. And of course, I should add that there are dedicated voiceover CRMs as well. I know 2 or 3, but all of these can be at least £30, $50 every month, and that can add up. Whereas in the case of Notion, everything I'm showing you today is completely free. It's just the caveat is you'd need to put a bit of work in to make it work how you want it. But I like that because then it's exactly how I prefer to work. So that leads me on to the idea of do your own, roll your own, so that we can consider to get it working for us properly. It's completely unique to you. So you want to consider what information you need to be able to store to make your business more efficient. So if things are even working great in some aspects, I would still consider storing information about it, because in the event that that kind of progress dips, you will see it, you will notice it. So it's what information do you want to store to make your business more efficient that you could report on. The kind of information that allows you to track and monitor and report and reflect, essentially. Because in the world of CRMs, and I'm by no means an expert, but I've read enough now, there is the concept of getting work and keeping clients and growing your business. That is what a CRM really should represent. Oh, it's known as get, keep, grow. And there are many different ways to think about the different stages of a CRM. What's involved? What do I need to do? What do I need to store? So this may be useful, and it's what I just think is the core considerations for a CRM, you know, who is a voiceover artist. So this is quite specific. So here we've got a cycle that it's a typical kind of cyclical arrangement that you would start by general research about the market you're interested in, the type of work that you're interested in. And that may result in leads where things get a little bit more formal, in which case you start engaging and inquiring. That in turn may lead to something that bit more established, more manageable, more project-based, which is an opportunity that could be an audition or a quote in terms of voiceover work. There may be other types of opportunities, but those are the two main ones I would have thought. And if those opportunities are won, then that can result in a fully formed piece of work, a chargeable piece of work, known as a project, really, that has the usual stages of recording, delivering, no doubt amends, and invoicing. And then, so it would be managing that. And then finally, the idea of nurturing relationships. So you would look back across all of the information you've put in the CRM for the last month or so, and try and decide what works and what doesn't, what can be let go of, what needs more work on. And it's essentially like pruning your allotment in a way, or you know, just working on an allotment and identifying it, keeping it healthy. So it's a very important stage that just sit back a bit and just reflect on what has gone well and what hasn't. So in terms of that, the cycle of the different stages, that brings me to what I think is Notion's second killer feature, which is databases. And this is one of the biggest reason why people use Notion, but it's also one of the reasons why users get rather scared of it and rather concerned. And I've used many systems that do databases, certainly part of my other role. And I like the way Notion have implemented databases. It's very straightforward. It's very simple. They don't need to be terrifying. So I think if we just think of databases that just a table of data, but it has a little bit of a structure to it, and we apply that back to the wheel itself, the idea of research to leads to opportunities to projects and then nurturing, then we can then start thinking about how we can create databases to support those 5 activities. Now, in any kind of CRM, you're going to want a to-do list and maybe a calendar that supports that to-do list. That's a given. And any CRM surely would need a contacts database. So we'll have a look at doing that. The leads itself, that can be something that's quite different for different people, but I'm going to just suggest that we have, say, some kind of journal where you just record thoughts before they sort of crystallize into requesting opportunities or engaging with a potential client. So that's what I think we could just have a quick look at, a leads journal, and that all 3 of those things really cover those first 2 parts of the cycle. In terms of opportunities, well, that's a straightforward database just to say, here's this audition on this date, or here's this quote I sent on this date, and I either won that or I lost that. So that's going to be quite simple just to handle as a straightforward database, and that covers that part. The next piece, which I think is one of the most important pieces, is managing those projects or the opportunities that were won, that you actually gained the work for. And again, it can be just a project tracking database, but it's going to look a little different. It's going to be using something called a board in Notion. And then the final stage, really, nurture, doesn't really have any kind of database, but I think it's an important stage where you just somehow you make time, you find time and make time to review all of it. And that can just be going back through all of the databases that you've got, maybe archiving things, reflecting things. And I think so it's going over all the stages and then just ready for the next period, essentially, where you may start to research new opportunities while maintaining the existing projects and leads. So that's how I think we could implement this in Notion. Let's just launch into creating the first database, a very simple one, which will be the to-do list and the calendar. So I'll just jump back into Notion. What I like to do is, because that's all just a bit messy, we'll just create a new page and let's call it CRM. Okay, now in here, just as a reminder of that wheel, I just have something on the clipboard. So I'll just throw that in there. So there's an embedded image so we can see what we're actually going to do. So there's the image. I could move it, get rid of it later, but it's there just as a reminder. I'm just going to collapse this navigation as well so that we've got a bit more space. And using the wonderful slash key, I'll just type that. And now if I start typing the first few letters of what I want, so DAT, then we can see database, and I'll choose full page here. So I'll just press enter, and we've got brand new database here, which I shall call to-do list. So this is your first database in Notion. In Notion, a database always has 3 empty rows. They always have a name, and they always have tags. Now, tags are exactly the same as like labels. It's associating a value with that piece of information in the database. So in this to-do list, you'll find that we'll just give this a name, and that might be let's have a look. Ring Baking Brothers. Okay, this might be just some organization I saw while I was on a bus yesterday, and just I might want to contact them to see if they've got any opportunities going. That might be a to-do. Okay, the tags, what we can do, because this is a to-do list, we can just make the tags. Let's just rename it as status, okay, because that might help us a little bit better. So I've just renamed it there. We can change the type of it so that it's not multi-select. We just want to select one item. So in fact, it would be either select, or in this case, we could choose status. But I quite like to keep it simple, and we'll just choose select there. And we can add an option, which is done, and another one, which is not done, okay? So those are the options there for this status property that's associated with this database. So this Ring Baking Brothers, for example, could be not done. All right, and then if we just add a new entry, I don't know, it might be email another organization, Eyes and Co, saying opticians, we can say, yeah, well, we did that yesterday. So we can mark that one as done. Now in the to-do list here, what we've got here, all of these items, remember this to-do list is a page. This database is a block, but inside the database, all of these entries in the database are pages. So if we open that, what we can do here is this is the actual page to do with Baking Brothers. We can add as much content as we want. We can add who we spoke to, when we spoke to, any screenshots we might have sent, any kind of demos or whatever. We can do all of that kind of stuff. But I think to get a little bit more out of a to-do list, if we just add a property, if we add a property, that's just like a column. It's just something else to store about this particular to-do list. But when you add a property, it adds it to the whole database. So let's just do that. We'll just add a property. We won't call it property, and we'll just call it due date. All right. And we'll change the type from text down to date. And then we'll just click out of there. So now we've got a due date to Ring Baking Brothers by, and we'll say, make that tomorrow the 7th. Okay. We'll just click out of that. Click out of the actual page, and you can see the due date is there, July the 7th. And we've already done the I's and co. We'll just say we did that on the 4th. And then what we could do finally is we can just, let's just have a look at inquire as to promo for radio air. Now that's not done, and that's due by the 15th. Now here what we can do is, this is another to-do that's not done. We can just go in here and let's just say, if we wanted to make sure that we have something ready to send, in this case to this radio station, we could have a little reminder in here that will trigger an actual alert. So all we need to do is type @remind, and we could say Saturday. So what we can say is on Saturday, sometime, and I'm not sure what the default time is in Notion, you will get a message on your phone saying, remember to do something to do with inquiring for the promo for radio air. And if we just say, make that a future date. So you've got the ability to store dates in a to-do list, but also have reminders associated with anything in Notion. And if we actually click out of there, you will see in some of the, you will see a possibility of some of these dates appearing as you travel around Notion, saying there's something coming up, okay? Now, this is all fine. We've got a to-do list on the go. We've got a name, we've got a status, and we've got a due date. But what would be useful as well is if we can make that a calendar. So to do that, we can just simply add a view, call that a calendar, and select the calendar type and click done. And we can see already that we have a very simple calendar. So we can see what's coming up. The little tiny little icon there with the note suggests that there's more content in there as opposed to just a database entry. And if we want to change the date that's associated with the to-dos, we can simply just drag them and let go. So in this case, the Baking Brothers has been moved to the 19th, and you'll see that has changed in that entry there. So very simply, in our CRM, which has the wheel, we have a to-do list. There's the link that takes you to that page that contains the to-do list itself. There's the table, there's the calendar view, and then you're away. If you wanted to add something new, you could quite simply put it in there, give it the title, give it the status, and give it a due date. That is a to-do list, which is a database. That is your first database. So if we just go back to the slides a sec, we now need to just consider the other things. So the to-do list is very simple. In fact, they're all very simple. The key really is just to make sure how we can wire them up. So we'll go back in now and we'll consider the rest. So the research, you might remember we said we'd just have that as a journal. The leads and well, the opportunities will be a database, as will the projects, okay? So we'll just go back in here, back into Notion, back into the CRM, and we'll just create a new database which will support the idea of research and leads, and we'll call it the contacts database. Okay, so we'll just call this contacts, and again, exactly the same. You've 3 entries in the database. You have a name and some tags. Now, what I tend to think here is whether or not we might want to have things like, is this contact a person or an organization? So if we change this and just make the property a single select, and then we can just add an option, and we'll just mark that as person and organization. And then we can start filling out, let's just rename tags to type of contact. Okay, if I can learn to type. So there we go. So type of contact. So here we might have, I don't know, Jason Fox. We might have Radio Air, which if anyone here is from Yorkshire will know it doesn't exist anymore, but it's been there. It's still going, but under a different name. We'll have Baking Brothers as well. Let's have somebody called Amanda Wood. And really, we've got Jason is a person, Radio Air is an organization, as is Baking Brothers, and Amanda is a person. But what we can do also is you would add things like telephone number, URL, email address, all of that's possible just using the plus here. We'll just very quickly put one in for email, and we'll change that type and make it email. Okay, so when you add an email address and you are on your Android phone or whatever, these emails are clickable emails that you can then contact these users. Similarly, with phone numbers, you can tap on them and it will dial them. Okay, so it's pretty well set up for that kind of thing. But what might also be useful, if you consider that this contact list grows and grows, you might want to think, how could we link some of these people to their organizations that they work at? Now, in terms of what's called database design, some people would say, well, you have a person database separate from an organization database, and that's fine. That's probably the best way of doing it. Database purists wouldn't like what I'm showing them now, but this is just to get us going with a simple CRM. But simply, let's just have a new column called association, and you will see how easy this is. If we just change the type to a relation down here, all we're saying is we want to relate this contact with this contact. Okay, that is all we are doing. So if we know that Amanda Wood works at Radio Air, we just select Radio Air and then click out, and we can see immediately we've got Amanda works at Radio Air, but Radio Air has an association of Amanda. That is a relation added to a database. Now, the relations could come from any other database in your Notion workspace, but this is just an idea that we can start to do things by connecting up information. And then we can just click around, navigate through the mouse, and just click and find all the information you want very quickly. So the other thing things you may want to store is we have a type of contact, so we could, if we wanted to, we could filter on those, we could sort on those. So just show me the people that I want to work with, not the organizations. So Notion supports all of that within databases. We'll just clear that filter down. You can also do things like, you could have another category so that what's the organization type? So it's a commercial organization, it's a studio, it's a television organization, all that kind of stuff. So if one morning you are in the mood for contacting lots of radio stations, for example, you could easily just filter down onto this list and show just the radio stations. And again, just to point out, this is a contact database, and every entry in the database is its own page in Notion. So here is Jason Fox's. You could put a photo of him. You could have subpages. You could have entire databases about Jason, though that I think would be a little bit creepy. So we can do all sorts of things there. It's just another type of content. It's all blocks in pages, okay? So there is our contacts database. And if we go back to the CRM page, we now have the contacts database there, all of it accessible, and we'll go straight on to the other databases, okay? So I'm just going to add in 3 more. One database that will represent the leads, one that represents the opportunities, and one that represents the projects. So I'm just going to put these in first, and I'll quickly go through all of the different types and how we can use them. So again, very quickly, I type /DAT down to full page. This one is called the leads, okay? I'll go back to the CRM. You can see it's there, there's the leads. We'll just do it again. We'll work on these in a sec. Full page, opportunities, and back to CRM. So creating these databases now, and projects. Sorry, do that again, database. Let's just take that away. Database, full page, and projects. So we have 3 more databases with nothing in them. And I'll just show you just some different ways just to work about them. If you remember in the wheel, I talked about leads potentially being a journal. Now, how would we have some kind of journal where we can just type thoughts, conversations, anything that might spark our interest in terms of creating more formal engagements? Well, I like to think that we could change this default table view to, instead of a layout of a table, a layout of a timeline. And with the timeline as the default, all you have now is exactly this. It's just a rolling timeline. So what we might have, we create a new page and we could just call it, again, it's just thoughts for the date for the 6th of July. And it's just a page. So we can just go in there, and again, it's free form. We can add entire databases into this one page. It's just a block. But we might type things like, I don't know, past bakery today just opened, any promo work required. So that might be to do with Baking Brothers. Okay, that might be just something that you can think of. Okay, and then if we just click out of there, and tomorrow, just similarly, we could just create thoughts for the 7th. Now, obviously, this means that you're having to go in here and create content, and you have to do some legwork to actually get these things set up yourself. But if you put the effort in, you'll get the rewards, I think. And there's really not a lot more than the leads part here, I think. It's random thoughts that get you to focus and get you to think about potential engagements that could lead to actual work. You could also, in this case, add a property to a contact if you have the contact, and none of these things need to be filled in. But we could add a property here that, again, we'll just call it contact here. And the type, instead of free-form text, would be a relation that goes back to the contact. You see, we can pick from any of these now. And then we'll just add that. So now this one maybe tomorrow might be to do with radio air. And then we can just select radio air. And tomorrow, I'm thinking ahead, but it might be heard on radio air, new opportunities. Whatever, okay, misspelled. But the key thing is you've got a link through to the radio air page that we know is an organization. Oh, look, Amanda Wood works there. So I might get in touch with Amanda about something I heard on radio air. So it's that idea of connecting it all up. Very simple. You could do far more than this. And I just want you to get thinking about the kind of information you may store in here. So there's a leads database, not much to it, random thoughts, but we get a bit more structured now if we go into the opportunities. And the opportunities, again, here's a database, but what we might want to consider is this might be, say, an audition, or it might be a quote for some work. So if we just have a look at the property here that's tags, you always get tags, and we'll just call it type. If it just lets me back in, we'll just edit property. We'll just do type of opportunity, and we'll make it a single select again, and this might just be audition again, and it could be a quote. Now you can change these colors, I should add. Okay, they're just random, but we might well find that there was an opportunity. Let's just add a date in there as well. Contact made, and that could be a date. And so there we've got a date. So I might have contacted radio air inquiry. This was to do with a quote, and the contact was made on the 5th. Okay, again, as I've said before, you could then have the associated contact listed in here, but for the purposes of time, I'm not going to bring that on there. You can also, what I think is useful for an opportunities database, we'll have an outcome column. Again, however you want to work it, we'll just make, again, this a select. We'll add an option of 1, and we'll have an option of lost. Okay, and in this case, the outcome was, we just got to edit that again because it didn't save that property. Okay, we've got that. So the outcome in this case was 1, emailed Baking Brothers, and who told me to get lost after a quote, and we can just say that was lost. Okay, now again, this is searchable, it's sortable, you can filter on it. So there's some great stuff here. You can connect back to all the contracts, the contacts and things like that. But also what you can do is you can quite easily embed views of this database on another page. So if we just go into the CRM here, you might want, for example, at the top of the page to highlight the things that you have won. So if we just type / as ever and just go to database, and we just want a table view of a database, we can say that we want to go to those opportunities, and it shows them, okay? And we want to show just the filter where the outcome was 1. Now, whenever you then go into the opportunities database and you mark things as 1 or lost, things will appear and disappear on this front page, okay, just automatically. So you can slice and dice your information and have it appear all over the place within a page. It's just I've chosen to put it on the front page here. So if we went into the opportunities and contact Eyes and Co, okay, and that outcome was 1, very simply on the front page, you will see that appear immediately. So as you're adding tens or hundreds of rows to these databases, if you set up different views on them and add them in different places, you will see them appear just as nice little summaries to keep working on. Now, for the purposes of this, I'm going to get rid of that. So it's just, we just keep this a little bit neater. Let's just clear that down. Okay, so we're back to just the front page. So the opportunities then, we have those things that we either quoted or we auditioned. We have a date. You could give it a unique number if you're getting into that kind of level in your business there. And then it's just an outcome. So over time, you will have lots of these entries, all sorts of different statuses and things like that. And then the final database really is to go back to CRM and we go into projects. Now, this is where I think the real good quality of Notion comes in here. We can, if we think about how we want to track chargeable work, we can consider like a unique ID. So we'll give this work ID, and this might be a project. So it could be PRJ 0123. You know, it's something unique, so you can put on invoices and all that kind of stuff. PRJ 1234 and so on. Okay, we have tags, we have work ID. Work ID is the main actual name there. So what we also have is maybe the status of the job. So let's just change that tags to status of the project. Now again, we can choose the select. And what I'll do here is I'll just come up with sort of 8 different stages that a managed piece of voiceover work might take. So it could be, for example, it's booked. Okay, it's agreed. It's signed off. You're ready to do it. So I've put 1 booked. 2 could be recorded. 3 is submitted. 4 is amends, a common thing. 5 is signed off. 6 is invoiced. So you've actually created and invoiced the client. 7 is the one that delays, which is payment received. And 8 might be archived, so you don't need to see it again, but it's there for future records or reporting. So we have 8 different statuses there. Let's also just add a name of project, and let's just move that across. Let's just shorten that. And the project might be called IVR for Baking Brothers. The status could be, well, it's just been booked, but actually I did record it, so it's in that status. Whereas this one, let's just have a think. Promo for Eyes and Co. could be, it's actually been invoiced. Okay. Now, again, we can add very quickly the contact it's associated with. So we just change that type down to a relation like we've done before. We associate a contact and we add the relation. And we could add the 1 opportunity. So again, it's a relation. We go into the opportunities database we created earlier, and then we add the relation there. So in this case, for the Baking Brothers, all we need to do is click there, and well, there's a few, but let's assume any of these 1. So we now have that opportunity that was 1 for this particular piece of work, and the PRJ 0123. Now this is all fine, but what I like with Notion here is we can add a view, and we'll just call it board, and we can choose the board, and then what we've got here is all of the statuses in a visual column, a visual arrangement. So at any time we can see that the project of 0123, which was specifically about the IVR for Baking Brothers, is in the recorded state, but the invoiced ones, there's 1 in there. And you can quite easily see that if you've got a lot of work ongoing, that you don't really want some of these columns to fill up. So you can quite easily see where any bottlenecks are. You can move things to another status by dragging and dropping. So when this one was not recorded but actually submitted to the client, you can just change it there. If we go into it, and again, it's just a page in a table in Notion, you can see it's submitted. And in this case, because it's submitted, what we might want to do is have some extra information to do with this job. Okay, so what we might want is original script. Or you can do all of this here. Okay, you can just add PDFs in here. We might have had some directions. We might have had the contract, contract and terms and conditions, that kind of thing. We might just let's just add a little divider there, so we might just then invoice sent. Again, you could add a PDF here, and so on. Okay, now all of that content there, what we can find is if we want to use that over and over again in these projects, we can create what's called a template. So in the new drop down, we can quite easily create a new template, and we'll call it a project template, and quite simply paste that content in there. So in future, when we want a brand new item adding into this projects management database, we can click on the drop down, click new project template, and then we have all of that content added in there completely with, say, it was booked, it was a contact, it was to do with radio air this time, and the opportunity might have just been a radio air opportunity. And that might be just called radio air, but it might also be PRJ1266. So you can see here in one page in Notion, it's filled out various bits and pieces of content for you just to fill in the blanks. You can see it's over here in the booked column. Eventually it'll move across to recorded, submitted, any amends. Hopefully you'll just jump from 3 to 5, signed off and invoiced. And when they do get completed, eventually after the payment's received and they are in archived, eventually what you might want is, well, I never really need to see archived. So we can just hide that column, okay, with the hide option there. It's there, you can see it there, but it doesn't take up the screen space. So in about 40 minutes there, we've created, admittedly, a basic CRM, but one that addresses the wheel here. It talks about a to-do list, contacts, leads, opportunities, and projects. And also the nurturing bit would be to just go through all of that and just to review that content. Now, just wrapping up with some of this stuff, the other things that are good to know about Notion is that you've got a trash can. So if you delete anything, and I did earlier, you can recover it. Okay, it's stored in a trash can, it's not gone forever. Pages can have version histories, but that means you're having to pay. And we'll come on to that very, very quickly in a minute. So by default, you don't have a version history. You can duplicate any of those blocks or the pages or the databases. You can easily copy paste, create templates from them, and people have gone wild with this out in the community. You can have synced blocks where you can have reusable content that appears all over Notion, but you only need to update it once. And that's an example of Notion just creating new features. That's just a few months old, is that particular piece of functionality. And as I've said, and I think one of the key things, you can set reminders anywhere in Notion, and you will be reminded wherever you have Notion running. And because it's a cloud application, it's called evergreen in sort of IT circles. It means that new features are being added all the time, such as the synced blocks. So it's quite an exciting thing to keep on top of. So if you want to take it further as a specific voiceover artist, well, hopefully you've had a few ideas there, but you could store invoices. You could store so-called boilerplate text. And for those of us who have seen an excellent presentation by Mel Parker about voiceover cheat sheets, that kind of idea of boilerplate text, reusable engagement text is very simple in Notion. And as an example, there's something I created in about half an hour. And it just shows you really links to pages with commonly reused text. So your kind of responses to initial engagements or a new client or an existing client and that kind of thing. And also perhaps the wording that you would use when you've sent a file. So it's that consistency of engagement, which I like with the CRM. In terms of integrations, you saw templates earlier. You see templates when you create a new workspace, the very first thing you do when you see Notion. And you can see those kind of things, but they're left for you to go and have a look at. They may be all you need, but I quite like the idea of building your own content so it works exactly for you. You can also see templates from the community, and some of these are paid, some of these are absolute monsters in terms of what they do, but these kind of things can be shared. I've shown you how to create an extremely simple template, but people add lots more bells and whistles there and make them available to the Notion community, either free or paid. And as you've seen, you can do your own and even share those if you want. One other thing is, if you really want to get more detailed, you can write formulas, so that in this case, it's a rather scary looking screenshot. Somebody has used some syntax to create some different color coded columns within a Notion database. You don't have to do any of that. I haven't done any of that in what I've been showing you, but just be aware that if you want to take it further, those are the kind of things you can do. And you can do some simple reporting. So you can do summary numerical counts, but again, you've got to store that those numeric bits and pieces of information to start with. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to report back on it. I think it's one of the things that's slightly weaker on Notion, but again, there are third-party products that you can add in to do more things like charting and bar charts and things like that. And in terms of integrations, you may have heard of If This Then That, or Automate, or Zapier or Zapier. All of these are integrated so that by using those services, you can connect Notion to with other data sources. And one final point on integrations is, just last year, Notion released an API, or application programming interface, which basically means that if you have the skills and know-how, you can create connections to any other application pretty much that has an API also. So Notion here have created integrations with Trello that you may use, Dropbox, so you can embed files, OneDrive, and so on and so forth, Google Drive, which I use. And also, so that's by Notion, but other organizations themselves have created integrations. So there's all sorts of things there. So the point is really, you don't have to have everything inside Notion. You can bring things into and push out from Notion if you connect them up this way. If you're interested in all of this that I've been talking about, there is some excellent help resource material out there. Notion's own website, written in Notion, its own website there is excellent. There's some great YouTubers. Those, you might want to make a note of a few of these. They're very useful. Keep Productive is always useful. And there's some great blogs. So those, if you really want to see some of the art of the possible, those are some very useful resources there. So finally, on the costs, the pricing, everything you've seen today has been free. If you decide you want to add a file that's larger than 5 megabytes in size, so if you work in audiobooks, listen up here, you won't be able to store that. You would see a message like this: your file is over the 5 meg limit. Everything I've done so far has been under that, so you've not seen that. But if that was the case, it would recommend that you would go with at least the Personal Pro. But for $48 for the year, that's not bad going if you choose to use this as a CRM. And quickly, the pros and cons of Notion. The pros, well, they've been going at it 6 years now. That's quite long in terms of cloud services. So they've had some hiccups, because I started using them when they were 1 year old. They've had a lot of redesigns, but I think it's very polished now. It's free, as we've said, it's multi-device, and hopefully you've seen that it's pretty fast to get started. Now, what seems a bit strange is I've got a lot more cons, but I don't think any of these are deal breakers. There's a bit of a learning curve, sure. The performance, some people have said, for many thousands of rows in a database can be impacted, but I think performance is something that they're always addressing. I found mobile to be a little fiddly. I certainly wouldn't design databases or any of that kind of stuff on the mobile. I tend to just use it for adding content, tweaking content, and that's it. That's what I tend to use the mobile. If you choose to leave Notion at some stage and you've had a CRM in place for a few years, it might be tricky to get that content out because you're kind of locked in with the database structure that they use. But it is doable. It's just you'd have an absolute mess of PDFs as part of the export process. No OCR search, optical character recognition. You can't search within images, you might add. Not a big deal for me. I use Evernote for that, and I still use Evernote for it. And if you're not careful, the UI can get a little cluttered if you're not careful. As I say, it's just one of those things. Keep it simple, keep it focused, and hopefully you can build your own business that way. As I said earlier, reporting could be better. It's not perfect. It's not bad in terms of simple numerical summaries. I wouldn't say it's great for file management. If you just want it in a full-blown file manager, there's better things than Notion. Notion is about content management and content tweaking and time-based management. And as I said earlier, because everything is really one row of text is a block, it's not necessarily the greatest thing for long form note-taking, but it's great for any other kind of note-taking. So to recap, it's free, it's rich, it's configurable. If you start with the basics, as I have done here, and grow from there, you will get into it. Hopefully the penny will drop. We have that concept of pages and blocks and databases and relationships, and that's all we've done today. There's far more you can do with Notion. And really, if you take the views and the different tables and the timelines and the boards, and you link them together, it could be, for some people here, if you link all of that content together, it could be a very useful CRM. And that basically is one that just works for you. Everyone's going to be different here. And that leaves me with just the final question as to whether or not, after seeing this, could Notion be your CRM? And on that note, I shall pass back to Guy for any questions or thoughts on what I've just shown.
Thanks, Andrew. It was excellent. And one thing I noticed there, you said about the file upload size. I've not come across any issues with that because I quite literally paste in a Dropbox link to where the file is stored rather than having to store it anywhere within Notion. We did have a couple of questions. One here from Martin. He said, typically, how long would you say it would take to set up as a CRM in the way that you've explained with customers and leads, but understanding that that would be different for personal requirements?
Well, the one I use, it was half a day, really. Once I saw how databases and relationships worked, it really was that just a focused block of time. But as I said earlier in the presentation, if you just start with one at a time, and then you might come into the idea of, well, I could do with tracking this as well, or storing information about this, put it in a different database and then just wire them up. So really it was half a day to get going. Of course, there's things like tweaks, things like reminders and calendar views and things. And you can go simpler than what I've shown you, or you can go crazy. But I tend to think simple is better because it then allows you to focus on just the content you're adding in.
Yeah, sure. What about integrating with email systems? I mean, a lot of the big guns of CRM enable you to sort of have a thread attached to the potential client or the client. Sure. The conversation is there. It's all linked up. Do you think there is a way of doing that, or is there?
Well,
does it really
possibly.
Matter?
Yeah, with if this then that. Yep. You can have triggers like when an email comes in that has this in the subject, then add it to a new row in a Notion database. But in terms of a sort of managing a thread, that may be more of a manual task. You could certainly have links to that thread in your preferred email application that you could then store that thread link inside Notion. Mm-hmm. But it isn't really, I get that there's a lot of CRMs that have built-in email functionality. Notion, I think, deliberately hasn't done that, because I think they probably think it's handled better elsewhere. This really is about databases and content. And if you want that kind of thing, then it would be worth looking into some of the integrations that you have, and there's loads of those.
Yeah, and one of the major factors for any email system is deliverability. I think there's potentially a risk there if you're using an email system within a CRM but your deliverability may be affected rather than using it through your dedicated email system.
Sure.
Not totally sure about the technical side of that, but I do remember coming across something like that. What about this? Una says, is there a way to directly upload your contacts or information, maybe from an Excel sheet, or would you be putting them in individually?
Well, you could certainly try the copy paste approach into an existing database. I've not tried it myself, or again, one of the integrations I think would do it. So things like if there is a new row added to a spreadsheet, send that over to a Notion database. I'm pretty sure if this, then that will do that. But I'd try the simpler way and copy paste and hope as the first approach for that.
Yeah, and you could easily export if needed as well in the same way.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. David was asking, is it online or does he need to download it? I use it as both. So I use it, it's the cloud system, isn't it? But I've got the actual, I've got an app on my Mac and on my iPhone as well. So it's very easily accessible.
Yeah. It's worth saying as well that you can work offline, but it'll only sync when you're back online. Okay. So ideally you'd have a permanent connection for Notion.
Yeah, but it also syncs perfectly.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. And well, if there's any other questions, do pop them in. Alberto, what's your thoughts and feelings on that?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. I think it's all about studying what are my needs, what are my databases, and create them. Like Andrew said, start with the very basic and go growing from there. One of my main concerns so far, or questions so far, was how to connect maybe those email threads into the contacts in Notion. But yeah, apart from that, it looks like if I can bring scripts in, the audio's recorded with the amends and everything, and I can have it all in one go, one click, and see how the project is going with that particular client. I think it's great. Yeah, I like it.
And the thing with the email threads, it might be a bit crude, but as a workaround, you could print that to a PDF, Alberto, okay, and then just drop that PDF in as an attachment into the part of the CRM. Yeah. You might need to update it. It's certainly not going to be dynamic and live, but there's ways around it.
Yep. Yeah. It looks very, very useful. Yep.
Yeah, and well, I haven't really used it that much in this way, but you can also, you can embed, I think, a web page into any page or any sub page within Notion as well.
Yeah, it's called iframes. Yeah, so they support iframes, so you can just have a little window into an entirely different web page there.
So that would be dynamic, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Great. Cool. Okay. Well, if there's any more questions, then do pop them in. And Andrew, how do we find out more about you?
Well, my link's there. I'm on Linktree, so I've got various social media engagements there. I'm contactable at that email address as well. And yeah, there you go.
Sure. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for doing this today. There's one more question here, actually. Well, as David said, is there a way to link it to other systems such as LinkedIn Helper? I'll jump in on that. I don't think so at the moment. I don't think there's going to be any integration there. But because Notion is taking a kind of getting a stronger foothold, I think there's going to be more kind of coming together.
Yeah, it's absolutely exploded since, I have to say, I didn't mention this earlier, a couple of years ago, you were allowed in the free plan 1,000 blocks. That was it. Now, at a certain time, Microsoft announced some kind of opening up of the limits of, I think it was OneNote at the time. And coincidentally or not, Notion removed their 1,000 block limit. And ever since then, and also with the introduction of their massive API release, which was just a year ago, it is an enormous product with an enormous community now. It almost has a bit of a cult following, does Notion. So it's definitely one to watch. I still use other applications. I still use Evernote a lot, but Notion has definitely replaced quite a few of those other note applications that I mentioned earlier on.
Yeah, sure. Una says that she says that's such a great guide. she was actually able to build along with you as you spoke. And she says she's got a pretty basic setup already. So just in that
can't
short
ask
period of
fairer
time.
than that. That's great to hear.
Excellent. And just Alberto, do you have any questions?
No, only to thank you, Andrew, for such a great explanation of this program. No, my question was how to, now I have to dive into the thing and study what's my needs and create my thing. But it was basically that little question about how to bring the mail in there. And now I'm looking forward to dive in and discover what's my needs in this and have it all.
We should all never need a napkin ever again.
Yeah. Yeah. As we all desperately try to become paper free, and I think I've been trying that for the last 10 years at least, Notion has been the only thing that has helped me move away from paper for majority of my work. So yeah, I'm definitely going to go down the route of looking into it as a CRM as well. Andrew, thank you so much. Very kind of you to do this. We'll have you on again at some point for something else. And do go and check out Andrew's profile, etc. Thanks very much for Alberto, and thank you for everyone else for turning up today. Hope you enjoyed it and you found it useful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.